January 26th. This is the Ways and Means Committee. We are going to start our day talking about H701, an act related to the Vermont Earned Income Tax Credit and Vermont Child Tax Credit, two of our favorite topics in this room. And then after the floor, we are going to continue our conversation about the corporate income tax and worldwide reporting. If the floor goes very long, check in with Sorsha because we might or might not meet. And with that, Representative Demrow and Representative Beck, would you like to tell us about your bill?
Yes, indeed. For the record, Carl Demrow, State Representative from 1 District, a longtime listener, first-time caller. So H701 is a bill that expands the Earned Income Tax Credit. And we've talked about that credit in here quite a bit. So I'll just review a few things for you here now. So we know that refundable tax credits work, and they've been proven to help people who need them the most. During the pandemic, the temporarily expanded federal tax credits helped bring 10,000 people in Vermont out of poverty. These tax credits help Vermonters bounce back from tough economic times by giving families a stronger financial foundation. They also make our tax system fairer and more progressive. In tax year 2022, 32,911 households got the EITC in Vermont, helping workers with low earnings to better cover expenses and take care of their families. The proposed EITC increase means up to $625 more a year for a family with 1 child and $347 for a family without children. Currently, the maximum credit is $1,419 for a family with 1 child and $213 for a family without children. I'll talk about that in a minute, just to remind everyone how that percentage works. Last year, JFO estimated that the cost of this bill would be $14.4 million. Money that we invest in helping families secure the basic necessities of life, and that ripples out into our economies. So we talked yesterday a little bit about progressivity and how Vermont does on that scale. This proposal would help us on the lower income side of the progressivity scale by adding some money back into the pockets of lower income Vermonters, which would help them get closer to that basic needs budget number that we also talked about yesterday. And let's just talk a little bit about how the credit works, and Pat's here in case I need to phone a JFO. So as you guys remember, you may recall, so the current credit is 33%, 38 all around. So whether you've got children or you don't have children, it's 38% of the federal maximum. So and we know that on the low side of things, or on the for folks who don't have children, the benefit is really pretty small. So the federal benefit. So we're not talking about a lot of money here to increase it to 100%. And going to 55 for families with children, that's where most of the money would be. Okay, just to remind you of how that all works. I think that's about it. I mean, this is something that we've worked on and most of us are familiar with. And so any questions at this point?
Representative Brannigan?
How much will this cost us?
$14.4 million is the estimate that JFO had last year. And I asked Pat to confirm that yesterday, and they haven't done a fiscal note on it, but it's ballpark. It's a ballpark.
Representative Tell.
There's a question I've always had on that that I've never gotten an adequate answer. And that is, when you said the number of people who were brought out of poverty. Some of those people, and I don't know how many, were brought out of poverty just because they got more money. And some of them because they were then brought above the poverty. And some of them got out of poverty because they used the money to get jobs, to do things that actually brought them out of poverty. Is there any way to find out how many were actually brought out of poverty just by giving them more money, as opposed to by giving them opportunities.
Boy, I think that would be kind of hard. I mean, this is about money, right? This is
Yeah.
about money, putting money in people's pockets. So someone who maybe needs to have their car repaired so they can work, or someone who needs to have a babysitter look after a child of theirs for a few hours in the afternoon so that they can get more hours.
Absolutely.
I think it's all those things. I mean, those are where it makes a difference.
But
But
to bring them out of poverty, if you just give them more money and they spend it on gambling that they lose. Then
I don't think that's what the data backs up. I think the
Well,
data,
that's what I'm trying to find out.
I don't know, maybe
I mean, I've seen a lot of data that, and we can take more testimony on this, but I've seen a lot of data that folks spend essentially the cash from the tax credit on food and transportation, like primarily.
That's what I'm looking for.
And I'm sure we can get that to you. But I do think what Carl said is a really important point. So I was, remembering back when I had a young child and like tax season was like the best season. And I would spend my tax credit. Sometimes it was fixing my car and sometimes it was paying off credit card from like groceries. But often it was actually to pay for childcare for the summer. Like the timing was perfect and I would pay for summer childcare so I could work. And so like that is like, it brings someone out of poverty so that they're living in a marginally less stressful situation, which then enables them to engage more fully in the economy or their community. And that then brings them further out of poverty. But I think just, you can't, I don't know if I'd separate those two things entirely, but you're just wondering basically how do people spend the money?
Exactly.
Oh, that's like, there's a lot of national research on that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what was so amazing about the federal changes, is that we got to really see like writ large what these, what like a grand experiment to eradicate child poverty can do.
Okay. Yeah. Be great.
I bet someone from Public Assets will send you that fairly soon. Were there other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So the tables we saw yesterday with the poverty level below 20%,
bar graphs.
right?
Yeah.
The existing folks that get the federal now and the 30 to 8% in Vermont, is that included in that calculation?
In the calculation that showed the refundable credit on the bar graph, I would believe that has to be included. And I think the other important thing about this to remember is that it's not just, it's not going to create a and then a It's going to create a and then a right? So it's also going to make a difference in that next bar too. So it's not just going to be that first bar, but it'll make a difference in that next bar as well. So it'll bring us more of a ramp towards the middle income side of things. I don't know if Representative Beck wants to add anything. He's a co-sponsor as well, and he loves it, I know.
Yeah. So I am a co-sponsor on this bill, and I've always, since I've been in this committee, we have done one expansion of EITC. I think it was a couple sessions ago, pre-COVID, I think. And I mean, it's a proven program. It's not. We know this helps people. We know it encourages work. It's a proven program, and I don't know if we'll end up with $14.4 million to do all of this or some other number or whatever, but this is a proven program that we know accomplishes the goals that it's meant to accomplish. So
I had a really interesting conversation with someone, I think, in the fall about this, and then like particularly in Vermont, where we're talking so much about our workforce shortage, and how to like really rethink government as our workforce in America changes. And that we have this like entire government infrastructure that's based around sort of like 1920s era ideas about sort of charity and government and bureaucracy, and how expensive so many social services programs are when they are like, have all of these sort of gates to participation. And how at the end of the day, like really what they're doing after all those gates to participation is giving people money in their pockets, and how much just more efficient this is as a strategy. It's more humane, it's more dignified, and it's like more efficient and saves government money, which I think is sort of an interesting piece of the puzzle. Carl, I have a question for you though. So we looked at a really great report that Pat put together about sort of the single person and EITC. And I just wondered if you could talk about that a little bit more, like because I think it's really counterintuitive to see legislative language that's like the single person gets 100% and the person with a family gets less than 100%. And
Sure.
like, I think that looks unfair on the face of it to people. So I'd love for you to explain the rationale.
Well, I think this,
I don't think it is unfair.
yeah, no, that's fair, that's fair. This is a program really about children. And it is about lower income workers, but it's primarily about children. And that's why the federal benefit for a single person without children is really low. And that's why we can expand it to 100 and they still don't get that much money because they don't have children. Whereas when we expand it to 55%, up from 38 for folks with children, that's where all the money pretty much lives. So does that answer your question, Madam Chair?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that, the point you made
I
about
feel like 100% of a little bit of money.
Yes,
is
exactly.
Still less money than a
55% of a lot of
Different dates.
Yeah, it's different. You mentioned, your point about putting money in people's pockets versus providing services for them, which is so much more expensive, and I agree that this is a much more dignified way to approach things. It also gets them closer to that basic needs. I think what Representative Beck said about this being a proven program. We also have really good information now about what it takes to live here in Vermont, and the legislature and JFO have done good work on that. We know what it costs, and so this helps to get that. This helps to get rid of some of that disparity between what people are actually earning and where they need to be.
Can we have all those figures? I think one of the speakers yesterday gave us some beginning, or I read it somewhere yesterday.
You mean about the basic needs budget?
Yeah.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
asking about? Yeah, we can.
Basic needs and minimum wage. And there was one other figure in there too.
Joyce, I think, was talking about
And
that.
the research that Patrick did, I'm I'd be interested in that too.
So that's on our committee page because that's a report that was due. Wasn't that this year?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we talked about that the first week of the session.
The basic needs.
No, the EITC.
Yeah, that would have been last
That was
year.
last year,
The,
okay.
Tax expenditure.
But we can put this together, all those, yeah.
Okay.
And we can talk about the basic needs budget sometime.
That'd
Yeah.
be helpful. Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions for Carl?
I just wanted to point out something you mentioned that has persuaded many people in my former profession of economics of all political stripes. Namely, this is you use the word most efficient, but it creates no new administrative costs. And that's huge. You mentioned it, but that's really where the burden for governments is the monitoring aspect of this administration. And this does it in the most cost-effective way you can imagine. And so it's brought a whole lot of people on board. Some people who you would never think of it are actually open-minded to negative income taxes for exactly that reason.
I think it was Richard Nixon that started this whole
It
program,
is.
wasn't it? Yeah.
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 And when we passed both the child tax credit and the expansion of income tax credit, this was a absolutely nonpartisan, bipartisan initiative. Yeah.
For sure.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for
The
the
two of you
time.
for sponsoring this,
I'm
and
back over there now.
thank you. Well, actually, we are done for the morning. We will be back here after the floor, which is still the morning. We're done for the early morning, and we will be back here after the floor to continue conversations about